He had no backstory, no motivation, no personality, just, quote, doll-like eyes and a burning desire to murder every single NPC he met. Over the course of 3 sessions, this player would massacre an entire mining camp, stab his own teammate in the stomach, choke on his own poison, rage quit 3 separate times, and still, after all of that, insist that everyone else was too stupid to understand his deep and complex character. This is the story of the ultimate edgelord murder hobo. Part 1. This story takes place in one of the most beloved fantasy settings in gaming history, the Elder Scrolls, specifically the province of Morrowind, set sometime before the events of the game of the same name. The GM had put together a homebrew campaign using a D&D 5e Elder Scrolls add-on, and the group was playing online through Discord and Roll20. Now our narrator did not join until the 3rd session, so everything from the first 2 was told to him by the other players afterward. But let us start with the cast, because understanding these characters makes the disaster that follows even more painful. The GM was a genuinely chill guy. Our narrator had met him through World of Warcraft some time before. He was relatively new to running games, but he took the role seriously. He worked hard to build a compelling story with interesting NPCs and meaningful encounters. He was showing real potential as a game master, and everyone at the table respected the effort he was putting in. Tez was an Argonian rogue and mercenary who had seen the horrors of war. His voice acting was so good that it genuinely inspired our narrator to improve his own role-playing. In-game, Tez served as the voice of reason, the one who kept the group focused and tried to resolve problems through conversation before violence. Out of game, he was serious but helpful, the kind of player every GM dreams of having. Tora Grimm was a Nord barbarian, and he sounded exactly how you would expect a Viking to sound. Deep, booming, absolutely gorgeous. His character was a working man, actively seeking employment to provide for his family back in Skyrim. Outside the game, Tora Grimm's player was funny and nerdy in the best possible way. Together with Tez, the two of them quickly built a genuine friendship between their characters, full of mutual respect and camaraderie. And then there was Creep. Creep played an albino dark elf named Faina. Yes, that Faina. And that name was essentially the only thing anyone would ever learn about this character, because there was nothing else to learn. No backstory, no motivation, no goals, no personality beyond a nihilistic outlook on absolutely everything. The character sheet was a void. As for the player himself, he was odd. He was a self-described enthusiast of anime culture, the kind with, quote, all sorts of strange preferences. He would not stop talking about how deep and complex his own stories and characters were. He constantly bragged about being a master of Elder Scrolls lore. Our narrator already knew Creep as a GM from another game, and he knew that Creep's stories, to put it diplomatically, were not great. But he was willing to give Creep a fair chance as a player. No ill intent, no bad expectations, just an open mind. That open mind would not last long. It is also worth noting that Creep was already running another campaign as a GM at this time, a campaign that our narrator was playing in, and while that game was not a complete disaster yet, it would eventually become its own horror story. But that is a tale for another day. Before the campaign even properly started, there was already a warning sign. Our narrator overheard a conversation between the GM and Creep. The GM was politely asking Creep to write at least some kind of backstory for his character. Something, anything, a paragraph, a few bullet points, just enough to give the other players something to work with. Creep's response was, quote, "What is the point of a written backstory, duh?" After some back and forth, he grudgingly produced 2 sentences. His character was an outcast, a hired assassin, with a dark and tragic past. That was it. 2 sentences of the most generic, copy-pasted edgelord description imaginable. And those 2 sentences would be the first and last time anyone ever heard anything remotely useful about Faina's character. Now our narrator noted something fair here. A lack of backstory is not inherently a problem. Some players are brilliant at developing their characters organically during play. They start with a blank slate and build something unique and interesting through their interactions with the world. These players exist, and they can be wonderful. So our narrator decided to give Creep the benefit of the doubt. That was a mistake, a generous, well-intentioned, spectacularly wrong mistake. The campaign kicked off with a solid hook. A dark elven noble hired the party to investigate something strange happening at a nearby mine shaft. The mine had gone silent. Workers were all stationed outside. Mercenary guards were blocking the entrance and refusing to let anyone in. The noble's brother, who owned the mine, refused to explain anything. The employer made one thing crystal clear. This was an unofficial job. That meant no stealing, or at least not getting caught, no killing, no illegal activities of any kind. The pay was good, but the rules were firm. I think you already know where this is going, But trust me, it is somehow worse than you are imagining. On the road to the mine, the party tried to get to know each other. This is basic tabletop etiquette. You are colleagues on a job, so you make conversation. Tez and Tora Grimm immediately hit it off, sharing stories and experiences. A natural friendship was forming. Then they tried to include Creep. Every single time either of them attempted to speak with Faina, they received the exact same response. He looks at you with his emotionless, doll-like eyes and does not say anything. Every single time, no variation, no elaboration, just doll-like eyes and silence. After several failed attempts, both players gave up, hoping he would open up later. He would not. When they finally reached the mine, they found the workers' camp and the guards doing their usual routines. After asking around, nobody was willing to share useful information. The security at the mine entrance claimed there had been a collapse and a rock fall. They were clearly lying, and the party could tell. So they got together to make a plan. Actual teamwork, actual strategy. Tez suggested talking to the miners, maybe offering them some gold for real information. If nothing else, they might learn how to get inside without provoking the guards. Tora Grimm offered to create a distraction, make a scene to draw attention while someone else sneaks inside for a quick look. Simple, effective, low risk. Then they turned to Creep. Faina, any good ideas? He looks at you with his doll-like eyes and does not answer. Fantastic. So Tez went to talk to the miners, and that is when Creep made his move. He told the GM, I walk up to one of the guards stationed in front of the entrance. The GM described the guard repeating his orders that nobody was allowed inside. And Creep said, I draw my dagger and stab him above the liver. I roll to attack. The entire table went silent. The GM asked carefully whether Creep just wanted to injure the guard, maybe scare him, maybe intimidate him into cooperating. Creep said no, I kill him. And then immediately after, I try to slit the next guy's throat. What followed was an absolute massacre. Creep's character carved his way through the mining camp, murdering guards and miners indiscriminately. He made no attempt to spare anyone. He showed no hesitation. He offered no explanation. The rest of the party was horrified. Tez and Tora Grimm reminded Creep, both in character and out of character, that he had just catastrophically failed their primary objective. They were supposed to avoid breaking the law. They were supposed to be discreet. Instead, they now had a camp full of witnesses and a pile of corpses. Creep did not care. He did not respond to their protests. He just kept killing. Not a single word of explanation, not a shred of remorse, not even a hint that he understood what he had just done to the campaign. He left a trail of bodies and a camp full of living witnesses who had seen everything. So much for an unofficial, discreet mission. And because the surviving guards assumed Tez and Tora Grimm were his accomplices, both of them were dragged into the fight against their will. The mission was completely, irreversibly ruined before it had even begun. They descended into the mine ruins with the law now hunting all of them, and that is where the first session ended. Part 2. The second session began with the inevitable reckoning. Tez and Tora Grimm sat Creep down and told him exactly what they thought of his performance. They condemned his methods. They told him point blank that they would not be helping him if he pulled anything like that again. They pointed out that his psychotic rampage had turned all of them into wanted criminals. Creep's in-character response. He looks at you with his doll-like eyes and does not seem to care. His out-of-character response was even worse. When the other players pushed him on it, he told them they simply did not understand his ingenious concept, that it was their problem, not his. Then, without any warning or explanation, his character ran off alone into the dark tunnels of the mine shaft. No plan, no communication, just gone. Tez and Tora Grimm rushed after him, not because they wanted to help him, but because they needed to prevent him from making their situation even worse. The mine turned out to be overrun by strange creatures, animated statues made from some kind of obsidian material that had come to life for unknown reasons. During the combat encounters that followed, Creep fought entirely alone. He ignored most of the creatures, letting them pass to attack his teammates instead. He offered no support. He coordinated nothing. He simply carved forward through the tunnels like a man possessed. Despite fighting alone and being outnumbered by these obsidian constructs, Creep's character somehow survived. Unfortunately, when Creep finally reached the miners' barracks deep inside the tunnels, he came face to face with a guard who was surprised to see a stranger down here. This was a perfect opportunity. The guard could have been a source of information. He could have explained what was really going on in the mine. A single conversation could have advanced the entire story. Just joking, Creep tried to murder him on sight, without saying a single word. The guard managed to escape into the armory and slam the door shut. When the rest of the party caught up, They found Creep hacking at the reinforced door with a pickaxe, desperately trying to break through so he could finish the job. Tora Grimm had reached his limit. He asked the GM if he could use the flat side of his great axe handle to knock Creep unconscious. Not to hurt him, not to fight him, just to physically stop him from murdering another innocent person. He rolled and he missed. What happened next changed the entire dynamic of the campaign. The instant Tora Grimm's attack missed, Creep turned around and attacked the barbarian with full lethal force. Not a warning strike, not a shove, he aimed to kill. Creep activated some kind of class ability that increased his damage, and he landed a devastating hit. The already wounded gnawed barbarian crumpled to the stone floor with Creep's dagger buried in his stomach. He was still alive, but barely, completely unable to fight or defend himself. When confronted about this both in character and out, Creep's justification was simple. The gnawed quote was asking for it. That is where the second session ended. One party member was bleeding out on the dungeon floor, nearly killed by his own teammate. The mood at the table was absolutely grim. What had started as a promising Morrowind campaign had devolved into a hostage situation with one player terrorizing everyone else. Part 3. Before the third session started, the GM took Creep aside privately and asked him to work things out with Tora Grimm. Nobody at the table wanted a PC killing another PC. Creep agreed, but only under one condition. Tora Grimm's character had to beg for mercy, with, quote, the most humble approach. Let that sink in. The barbarian had done absolutely nothing wrong. He tried to non-lethally stop a psychopath from butchering an innocent man, and now Creep wanted him to grovel. Tora Grimm's player agreed, not because it was fair, but because he did not want the party to fall apart any further. The GM, however, had other plans. Our narrator joined the game in this session. He was playing a young dark elf warrior from House Redoran, sent on a mission to hunt down necromancers defiling ancestral crypts. His character entered the Daedric ruins from the other side, following rumors of a necromancer in the area. When the session began, Creep described how he was readying himself to finish off the unconscious Tora Grimm, but suddenly the door behind him flew open, kicking him prone. The guard from the armory stepped out, now fully decked in heavy armor, and planted his boot on Creep's neck. First rage quit. The Discord disconnect sound echoed through the channel. Everyone at the table just sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. The GM had set up a perfect dramatic rescue, complete with cinematic timing, and Creep's response was to slam his keyboard and leave. Tez used this opportunity to heal Tora Grimm with a potion while the guard kept his boot firmly on Creep's neck. The party searched Creep's character thoroughly, confiscating every weapon and item they could find. They tied him up as tightly as possible and gagged him for good measure. After a few minutes of blessed silence, Creep returned to the channel, only to be informed that his character was now thoroughly tied up and stripped of his equipment. You could practically hear the rage building through the microphone. What followed was one of the most spectacularly stupid sequences of decisions in tabletop history. Creep demanded to make an agility check with advantage. His reasoning, quote, I was a slave once and I should know how to escape in a situation like this. The GM paused, then he reminded Creep that he had never written a backstory. There was no slave history. There was no history of any kind. Creep insisted. The GM said no, regular check only. Then Tez started having fun with it. Shouldn't you make an edgy doll-like eye skill check or something? Creep, apparently not understanding sarcasm, actually created an escape artist skill on his character sheet and demanded to roll with it. Tez pointed out that no such skill exists in D and D5e. The GM told him to just make a regular acrobatics or agility check. He failed spectacularly, and he was furious about it, cursing like a sailor the entire time. But Creep was not done. Oh no, he had more terrible ideas in store. He announced that he wanted to pull a poisoned needle from a hidden compartment in his collar, using his teeth. The GM checked his character sheet. There was no needle. There was no hidden compartment. There was nothing of the sort anywhere in his inventory. Creep had been caught writing it into his character sheet in real time. The GM, incredibly patient at this point, decided to let it slide and allowed the roll. Creep tried to spit the poisoned needle at the guard. He rolled a natural one. Karma, it turns out, is very much a real thing in tabletop games. The GM described the scene beautifully. The bitter taste of poison filled Creep's mouth, so sickening that he started to cough uncontrollably. The needle fell from his lips and clattered on the stone floor in plain sight of everyone. Creep refused to accept the result. No, I do not cough. That is not how poison works. This is my character and I know better how he reacts to such a thing. The GM patiently explained what a critical failure means. You rolled a natural one. Whatever your character planned to do, it fails in the worst possible way. That is how the game works. Creep exploded. He blamed the dice. He blamed the GM, he blamed the rules. He blamed everyone and everything except the fact that he had just tried to put a poisoned object in his own mouth. And then came the killing blow. Another player pointed out something that nobody had noticed until that moment. How exactly did Creep pull a needle with his teeth from his collar and try to spit it at someone while wearing a leather mask over his face? The same leather mask he had described his character wearing since session 1. Creep never answered that question. Second rage quit. Another disconnect sound. At this point the group had witnessed 2 rage quits in a single session, which has to be some kind of record. The group took a moment of silence. The level of cringe was, as our narrator described it, so unimaginable that they needed a pause just to process what had happened. They were all certain Creep was gone for good this time. They finished their conversation with the guard, who gave them useful information about the ruins and the breach between the mine tunnels and the ancient Daedric temple below. He was planning to go AWOL, and who could blame him? Then, unbelievably, against all odds and all common sense, Creep came back, for the 3rd time, like a cockroach that simply refuses to stay down. Tez gave him one final chance. He removed the gag from Creep's mouth and laid out the situation with absolute clarity. Help us get through the Daedric ruins. Help us find whoever is responsible for the creatures attacking the mine. If we succeed, maybe we can convince our employer to forgive the massacre you caused at the surface. When it is all over, we go our separate ways and never see each other again. Tora Grimm and I will forget any of this happened. Or Tez continued, you can try to attack us again, in which case we will use you as bait for the traps in these ruins and then bring you to justice. Your choice, what will it be? Creep's response to this incredibly generous, probably undeserved final offer. He looks at you silently, with his doll-like eyes, while being completely silent. Tez put the gag back in. Trap bait it is, and honestly, at this point the party had been more than fair. They had given this guy chance after chance after chance, and every single time he had responded with violence, silence or both. The party entered the Daedric ruins dragging their murder hobo like luggage. Our narrator's character encountered the group in the ancient halls, and after a tense but civilized introduction, they realized they shared a common enemy and decided to join forces. That is when Creep made his final, desperate play. He showed the narrator's dark elf character a tattoo on his arm, a Morag Tong tattoo, the Assassin's Guild of Morrowind. He was trying to win over a fellow dark elf, an appeal to shared culture, shared heritage, one assassin reaching out to another. It was actually the first time in 3 sessions that Creep had attempted anything resembling social interaction with another character. A shame, then, that it was built on a foundation of complete ignorance. There was just one enormous problem. The Morag Tong has very specific, very strict rules. They are a legal organization in Morrowind. To assassinate someone, you need an official, certified contract, a document you can present to any justice system that proves your kill was sanctioned. Without that contract, you are not an assassin, you are just a murderer. Creep, the self-proclaimed Elder Scrolls lore master, apparently had no idea how his own character's organization actually worked. There was no contract in his backpack. There was no justification for a single one of his kills. Our narrator's law-abiding warrior from House Redoran, one of the most honorable houses in Morrowind, had absolutely no reason to help this madman. When Creep realized nobody was coming to his rescue, he lost it completely. Still tied up with multiple layers of rope, he tried to kick Tora Grimm in the stomach. He tried to stomp on the wounded Nord with his boots, screaming edgy threats out of character about how he would slowly murder every PC. Our narrator's character put him on the floor with a swift kick and added yet another layer of ropes. That seemed to be the final straw. 3rd and final rage quit, this time mercifully for good. The disconnect sound played one last time and the channel went quiet. The GM wasted no time. He permanently banned Creep from the server. The remaining players continued the campaign without him. The Daedric ruins were explored, the necromancer was dealt with, and the story that the GM had worked so hard to create finally got the attention and respect it deserved. As our narrator put it, they played happily ever after. But the story did not end quietly. After his ban, Creep exploded in a torrent of vitriol. He told everyone involved that they were the stupid ones, that they were all too dumb to understand his deep and complex edgelord character. The same character that had no backstory, no motivation, no goals, no personality, and no understanding of its own fictional organization's rules. That character, deep and complex. Our narrator noted that this was his first real encounter with a true murder hobo, not just a player who prefers combat over talking, which is a perfectly valid playstyle, but a player who genuinely wanted every single character dead, including his own teammates, including innocent bystanders, including anyone who looked at him wrong, for no reason at all beyond, quote, "You just do not understand." Outro. If you want to play a dark and edgy character, that is absolutely fine. Plenty of great stories have come from morally questionable protagonists, but if you are playing in a group, your character needs to function in a group. This is a collective game. If nobody else at the table is having fun, if your teammates are begging you to stop, if the GM is pulling you aside between sessions to ask you to please just write a backstory, then you are not playing a complex character. You are just being selfish. And sometimes, after 3 rage quits, a failed poison needle, and a leather mask that apparently has no mouth hole, the trash really does take itself out.